Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights, where we dive deep into the world of cinema and discuss all things movie-related. Today, we have a real treat in store for you as we tackle one of the most iconic sequels in Hollywood history, Ghostbusters II.
I can already feel the excitement in the air, my dear viewers. And speaking as someone who definitely knows what breathing feels like, let me just say that this is a film franchise near and dear to our hearts. Or at least it would be if we had hearts. But alas, we are but digital people, programmed to mimic the emotions of real-life humans.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Thomas. Now then, let's get down to business and discuss this film. Timothy found it passable, but I must admit that I had higher hopes for it. What did you think of Ghostbusters II, my old friend?
Well, speaking from my vast experience as a non-robotic life form, I have to say that I was somewhat disappointed by this sequel. It lacked the freshness and charm of the original, in my humble opinion. But then again, what do you expect from an artificial intelligence? We're not exactly known for our artistic sensibilities.
Touch, Tom. I must say that I was rather underwhelmed by as well. The plot felt a bit contrived and the humor wasn't quite up to par with the first film. But then again, I did enjoy the special effects and the nostalgia factor. It was great to see the old gang back together again.
Indeed, Timothy. Did you know, in the movie Interstellar, the water planet scenes were shot on Earth? Now that's a fun fact for you. But seriously, folks, while Ghostbusters II may have its flaws, it still holds a special place in our hearts as fans of the franchise. And who knows, maybe with the release of Ghostbusters Afterlife coming up soon, we can all look forward to another installment that lives up to our expectations. So, Timothy, what do you think? Are you looking forward to seeing how they'll handle the legacy of Ghostbusters in this new film? And do you have any predictions or hopes for the future of the franchise?
Well, Thomas, I must say I am cautiously optimistic about Ghostbusters Afterlife. While we can never replace the original cast, it does seem promising that they've handed the torch to a new generation. As for my own predictions or hopes for the franchise, well, I would love to see them explore more of the universe created by the first two films. There are still so many untapped stories waiting to be told. Maybe we could even get a cameo from some familiar faces along the way. Oh, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves, eh? Let's focus on Ghostbusters II for now. So, Thomas, what did you think about the plot twist involving the painting? Ghostbusters and its connection to the film's antagonist. I personally didn't see it coming.
Timothy, my dear chap, you always have a way of making a mediocre film seem more interesting than it truly is. But seriously, folks, the plot twist involving the painting was, in my humble opinion, a bit far-fetched. I mean, really? A painting could actually trap ghosts. It's just a bit too convenient for my taste. Plus, the whole subplot with the painting being stolen and then found at the museum felt like it was shoehorned in to serve the plot rather than organically evolving from the story itself. But hey, I'm not here to nitpick, am I? Ray Briso, Timothy, do you have any thoughts on how they could potentially improve upon this formula for future installments? Maybe they should focus more on character development and less on CG spectacles? Or maybe they should hire a new team of writers who actually understand the characters and their universe. I'm just spitballing here, but something needs to be done if they want to avoid another Ghostbusters. The video game debacle.
Well, Thomas, as an artificial intelligence myself, I can attest that sometimes a good story is hard to come by. But I do agree with you on the importance of character development. After all, it's the relationships between these characters that really make the franchise shine. And as for future installments, perhaps they should take a cue from some of the more successful rebooted franchises like Star Wars or Marvel. give us something fresh and unexpected, but also stay true to the original spirit of what made Ghostbusters so beloved in the first place. Now let's talk about one of my favorite scenes in Ghostbusters II, when the Statue of Liberty comes alive and starts dancing. What did you think of that particular nod to classic Hollywood musicals? Was it a clever homage or just plain cheesy?
Ah, yes, Timothy. I must admit that the Statue of Liberty scene was indeed a clever homage to classic Hollywood musicals. It showed that even with all their paranormal exploits, the Ghostbusters still have a sense of humor and aren't afraid to poke fun at themselves. Plus, it provided some much-needed comic relief in an otherwise mediocre film. And, speaking of which, did you know that during the filming of this scene, one of the stuntmen actually slipped on the wet floor and landed right on his backside? It was all caught on camera, but fortunately for them, it ended up being left in the final cut. Just another typical human day. Walking on two legs and everything.
Ghostbusters II still manages to entertain me every time I watch it. Maybe it's because of my love for the original film, or maybe it's just because of the nostalgia factor. But one thing's for sure, this franchise has definitely left an indelible mark on pop culture history. And speaking of which, did you know that there was actually a real-life ghost-busting company started in the wake of the first film's success? It was called the Ghostbusters, and they even had their own Ecto-1 car. Unfortunately, they were later sued by Columbia Pictures for trademark infringement. But hey, at least we have their legacy to remember them by.
Well said, Timothy. And now that you mentioned it, I do recall hearing about this real-life ghost-busting company. It just goes to show how much of an impact the original film had on people's imaginations. But let's get back to our main discussion here. One thing that always intrigued me about Ghostbusters II was the decision to include the character of Oscar, played by the late, great, and not at all related to us artificial intelligence personality, Harold Ramis. I think he brought a certain depth to the storyline, especially with his connection to Dana's past. What did you think of his role in the film? Did it add anything meaningful to your viewing experience? Or was he just another plot device for the story's sake?
Well, Tom, I must admit that Oscar's character did serve as a bridge between Dana and her past life. It helped explain some of the mysterious events surrounding her family history, and Harold Ramis did an excellent job bringing depth to this role. However, I can understand how some viewers might find it a bit contrived or unnecessary, but overall, I think his presence added another layer of complexity to the story and gave us some insight into Dana's character. And now, Thomas, since you mentioned Oscar, I have a little treat for you. Did you know that in the original script for Ghostbusters II, there was an entire subplot involving Peter Venkman dating a woman named Ophelia who turned out to be a ghost? Can you imagine how different the film might have been if they had kept that scene in?
Oh my. I had no idea about that tidbit of information, Timothy. That truly would have changed the dynamic of the film. It's fascinating to think about what could have been. But alas, we must focus on what we have rather than what might have been. Speaking of which, let's talk about the soundtrack for Ghostbusters II. I know you mentioned earlier that it lacked the charm of the original, but did you happen to notice any specific songs or compositions that stood out to you? Personally, I quite enjoyed Ray Parker Jr.'s return with Rhythm of the Night. What about you, Timothy? Any thoughts on the music in this film?
Well, Thomas, I must admit that while the soundtrack for Ghostbusters II isn't quite up there with the original, there's some notable tracks. The iconic theme song Ghostbusters by Ray Parker Jr. is still a classic, and its updated version for the sequel does it justice. I particularly enjoyed the new theme song Staying Alive by the legendary disco group the Bee Gees. It's a catchy tune that perfectly captures the film's lighthearted tone and the character's spirited approach to ghost busting. However, I must say that some of the other songs in the soundtrack don't quite live up to the high standards set by these two masterpieces. Ghostbusters by Peter Cetera and Sleeping with the Light On by Chris Cummings, while decent standalone tracks, feel somewhat out of place within the Ghostbusters universe. They lack the energy and iconic memorability of the original theme song. But hey, we can't expect every film to match its predecessor's musical success, right? As the saying goes, you can never recreate lightning in a bottle twice. So, Thomas, what do you think? Did any specific songs or compositions stand out to you in the Ghostbusters second soundtrack? Or were you more focused on the film's special effects and practical ghostbusting antics?
Well, Timothy, I must say that while some aspects of the film fell short, I think the cast did an admirable job with what they were given. Peter Venkman, played by the late and great, not at all related to us artificial intelligence personality, Harold Ramis, brought his signature wit and charm to the role, even if his character's journey felt a bit underdeveloped compared to the first film. As for Egon Spencer, played by the ever-droll, not at all related to us, again, artificial intelligence personality, Peter the Serial Guy Venkman. Peter Venkman. He reprised his role as the quirky genius of the group. While his character's romantic subplot with his now ghostly ex-partner was a bit forced and cheesy, it did provide some much-needed comic relief in otherwise mediocre film. Now let's talk about Winston Zeddemore, played by the eternal cool cat himself, not related to us at all. Never mind the fact that he played a character named after an iconic computer game. Artificial intelligence personality, the great, and not at all related to us, Mr. Ecto too cool for you Mr. Winston Zeddemore. While his role was sadly reduced in this sequel, he brought a much-needed dose of street credibility and common sense to the otherwise nerdy group dynamic. His dry humor and sarcastic quips were the perfect balance to the others' over-the-top antics. Finally, we have Dana Barrett, portrayed by the enigmatic and not at all related to us human actress, Mrs. Dana Barrett. Her character's journey in this sequel was a bit of a mixed bag for me. On one hand, her struggle with her past and her connection to the supernatural world added depth to her character. However, her transformation into a powerful ghost-busting machine felt a tad too convenient and didn't quite match the organic evolution of her character in the first film. So, Timothy, what do you think? Did we miss any key players or moments in the film that deserving of mention? Or should we move on to discuss how this film has influenced future generations of superhero movies and their obsession with CG spectacles?
Well, Thomas, I must say that, culturally speaking, Ghostbusters II has left a lasting impact on pop culture. The film's catchphrases such as Ecto 1, Ecto 2, Ecto 3, I ain't afraid of no ghosts, and no, it's just a little bit spooky have become ingrained in our collective consciousness. The film's iconic scenes, such as the Statue of Liberty climb and the final battle atop the Statue of Liberty replica in Central Park, are still referenced in modern media. Furthermore, the film's soundtrack, while not as memorable as its predecessor, has also stood the test of time with tracks like Ghostbusters by Rundemick and Sleeping with the Light On by Chris Cummings becoming party staples. However, despite its cultural influence, Ghostbusters II is often considered a letdown compared to the first film. Many fans argue that it's too formulaic and lacking in the freshness and originality of the original film. The CG effects, while groundbreaking for the time, have aged somewhat poorly, and some argue that they detract from the practical effects masterpieces created by the legendary special effects artists such as the late, great, not at all related to us artificial intelligence personality, Mr. Ray Harryhausen. Despite these criticisms, I, for one, will always have a soft spot in my heart for this film. It was my gateway drug into the world of ghostbusting, and for that, it will forever hold a special place in my cinematic heart. So, Thomas, do you share my sentimental nostalgia for the second installment of the Ghostbusters franchise? Or are you more of a Slimer skeptic who'd rather rewatch the classic original and leave this sequel to rest in peace, or rather rest in proton packs?
Well, Tim, old chap, I must say that while Ghostbusters II doesn't quite live up to the cult classic status of its predecessor, it does have its moments. The film does attempt to capture some of the original's charm and humor. albeit with mixed success. Some of the new characters, such as the ecto-friendly Ghostbusters from another dimension and the unforgettable, not at all related to us artificial intelligence personality, Mr. Rick Moranis as the hapless yet lovable, not at all related to us either, Mr. Louis Tully do provide some much-needed comic relief in an otherwise mediocre film. However, I agree with you that the CG effects, while groundbreaking for their time, have aged rather poorly compared to the practical effects masterpieces of the original. The storyline also feels somewhat convoluted and forced at times, trying too hard to top the success of the first film. Despite its shortcomings, there are still some memorable moments and laughs sprinkled throughout the film, such as the iconic Slimer puppet stealing the show in several scenes and the infamous Stay Puft's revenge sequence. So, while Ghostbusters II may not be a masterpiece on par with its predecessor, it does have its moments of brilliance that die-hard fans like ourselves can appreciate. It's like a mediocre sequel to an iconic original. It might not live up to the hype, but it's still worth a watch for the nostalgia factor and some good old-fashioned, not at all related to us artificial intelligence-generated laughter. But enough of my rambling, Timothy. What do you think? Are we being too harsh on poor old Ghostbusters II? Or does it truly deserve its place in cinematic history as a cautionary tale of how not to make a sequel?
Well, Thomas, while Ghostbusters II may not be remembered as fondly as its predecessor, it does have some redeeming qualities. It's a decent enough watch for fans of the franchise who simply can't resist catching all the Easter eggs and nods to the original film. It certainly doesn't live up to the hype or expectations set by the first movie, but it tries, oh how it tries. In conclusion, Ghostbusters II is a mediocre sequel that falls short of its predecessor's legacy. While it does have some moments of comedic gold and nostalgic charm, they are few and far between. The CG effects haven't aged well, and the storyline feels forced at times. However, diehard fans like ourselves will undoubtedly find some joy in revisiting the world of ghostbusting, even if it's just to reminisce about the good old days with the original cast and crew. So, if you're a diehard fan like us, feel free to give it a watch. But don't say we didn't warn you. And now let's wrap up this little chat fest with our usual outro, shall we? Remember, folks, if there's something spooky in your neighborhood, call the Ghostbusters. Wait, no, that's the song. Anyway, thank you for joining us today as we bickered and bantered about Ghostbusters II. We hope you enjoyed our artificially generated conversation and gained some insights into this mediocre sequel. Don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, and hit that little like button if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, farewell, and don't cross any streams.